Do this. Let's take a moment. We're going to explain a few basic things here. The issue of so-called non-traditional pronouns goes together with non-traditional gender identities. New York City, for example, recognizes 31 such gender expressions. In other words, besides man and woman, there are 29 other gender expressions. And Nicholas, this is where I want to bring you into the discussion because you teach this. You teach trans studies. So if you would, give us a brief primer on so many gender identities that, in your view, require non-traditional pronouns.
Basically, it's not correct that there is such a thing as biological sex.
I guess it's time. Let's do this.
And I'm a historian of medicine. I can unpack that for you at great length if you want, but in the interest of time, I won't.
All right, so I'm sure you've all heard by now, especially if you're in any circles that overlap the ones I pay attention to, about Laurier University and the free speech concerns surrounding the now amended Human Rights Code in Ontario, Canada, as a result of the passing of Bill C-16. In case you haven't, I'll give you the skinny. In mid-2016, a professor of psychology and clinical psychologist, Jordan B. Peterson, began to speak out online and in other forums against the then proposed legislature and his fears about its amendments to the Human Rights Code of Ontario.
What about the notion he put forward at the end there that if you do not refer to people with the pronoun that they prefer to be referred to, that is a form, according to the Human Rights Commission, of discrimination?
It's not just a form of discrimination, it's a form of hate speech. That's why I made the video. I said that we were in danger of placing the refusal to use certain kinds of language into the same category as Holocaust denial, and suggested that maybe that wasn't such a good idea. So it isn't clear to me how long we'll be able to have the talk that we're having right now.
I think that's a common misconception about Bill C-16, that it's somehow going to make pronoun use into hate speech. If you actually look at the provisions, we're talking about very minor amendments to the criminal code. For example,
they're not minor.
section,
they put it into the hate speech category. They're not minor at all. That's a misstatement.
Bill C-16 adds gender identity and gender expression to provisions in the criminal code that define an identifiable group for the purposes of advocating genocide, the public incitement of hatred, and the willful promotion of hatred. Do these provisions in any way criminalize the use or misuse of pronouns? Not even close.
He was met with much hand-waving and claims of transphobia in person and publicly, and resistance to his main cause for concern, that the bill would enable the limitless power of the state to impose speech on the individual in order to protect a very small minority of the population. He time and again pointed to the histories of fascist regimes and indicated that free speech was a crucial part of any society looking to avoid similar outcomes. In October of 2016, we end up where we began this video. Peterson was once again labeled a transphobe and subsequently a violent abuser of students by other members of the panel in a discussion on a publicly funded television show called The Agenda on TV Ontario. In May of 2017, the Ontario Human Rights Code was amended after Bill C-16 sailed through the Senate to include trans and non-binary people as a protected group under the law.
So I don't regard that as trivial, and I think that the lawyer who's discussing this is downplaying the significance of it tremendously.
Could I speak to the campus climate about this? Because I don't agree with why Dr. Peterson has been asked to stop abusing students on campus.
To stop doing what?
Abusing students.
I see.
And other members of our learning community who do deserve respect and do deserve to be able to work and learn and contribute to society in a place where if they are physically assaulted, if they are...
The assault so far came from the social justice warriors who are at this free speech rally, and almost 2 million people have watched those so far.
This is not accurate.
Well, you can look at the videos yourself.
Because people have been making complaints about your behavior.
Yes, I understand that.
Yes. And so we're seeing a greater opportunity for social justice happening that many people won't understand.
Nick, can I be clear on something? You've accused him of abusing students by not using the pronouns they want to be addressed by.
That's how I see it, absolutely.
That is tantamount to abuse in your view?
Absolutely. Many global documents, many organizations.
How about violence? Is it tantamount to violence?
Yes,
How about hate speech? Is it tantamount to hate
Yes,
speech?
of course. It's hate speech
Fine,
to tell
that's-
someone that you won't refer to them as in a way that that recognizes their humanity and dignity.
Bringing us closer to current day, Lindsay Shepherd is a TA at Wilfrid Laurier University in Ontario, Canada, who is teaching a grammatical exercise to some first-year students, and the topic of discussion comes around to pronoun usage. You know, him, her, versus they or zer. Using a topical 3-minute clip from the agenda episode seen earlier, Lindsay sought to further the discussion by presenting the two prominent opinions from prominent members of Ontario academia, resulting in a secret star chamber grill sesh, wherein Lindsay was brought to tears after being told that she had committed a violent act of transphobia, referencing both the Ontario Human Rights Code and the university's Code of Conduct. And that if she wanted to move forward as a TA, then she would have to submit to some pretty unrealistic and untenable conditions. These included submitting lesson plans for review to her supervising professor and his then unnamed colleagues, and having her supervisor sitting in on her classes with students going forward. Good thing she recorded it all for posterity. Now, I'm not playing any of that sanctimonious quasi-religious shit spouted by the supervising professor and his colleagues. To tell you the truth, I can't take listening to it anymore. If you want to hear it, there's a YouTuber by the name of Benjamin Boyce, who's done an amazing breakdown of that recording. There's a link to his video below. I can see he's had more exposure to and success in deconstructing the deconstructionalist language therein, and I do recommend you check out his other coverage of social justice gone wild at Evergreen State College and Reed University, as they are all full of eye-opening insights. Now, I would have cried just at the excessive use of social justice buzz phrases throughout that 40-minute nightmare scenario alone, but I don't think anyone could fault her for her emotional state in that situation of academic browbeating with those types of labels being affixed to her reputation. And I made a joke just a moment ago about social justice being akin to a religion, but there is a time in that session where you can almost hear the words, confess, bleeding through the word salad and prompts for apology, atonement, and fealty. There was, of course, a backlash against this kind of intellectual flogging once the recording was made public and videos aplenty started rushing through the YouTubes. This prompted Lindsay's supervising professor and the president of the university to issue public apology letters. Then began the intensification of videos covering Lindsay and Laurier, which thereby increased the media coverage of both. I want to now direct your attention to an article on cbc.ca, which is another publicly funded media channel here in Canada, dated November 29, 2017, titled, "Rancor of Free Speech Debate Led Gender-Diverse People to Feel Unsafe, Advocates Say." Here we begin to see the same opposition that was presented against Jordan B. Peterson last year when he warned us about the potential uses and misuses of the laws we in Canada are now governed by. To quote the article, "A result of sometimes heated recent debates over free speech on campus, some staff and students at Laurier University are saying they are increasingly being harassed." Now, if you do watch any of the videos I recommended below, you will see that advocates for social justice like to equate disagreement and spirited debate to harassment. They also will often misuse the term violence when referring to speech that is in opposition to their positions.
Public incitement of hatred. Well, the provisions of the Criminal Code requires that the incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace. Now, does that sound subjective? Well, the Supreme Court of Canada has said there's a very clear definition. The threshold is violence. In fact, there has to be personal violence.
Keeping that in mind, it goes on. An assistant professor is asking the school to establish measures to protect staff and students who become the subject of these attacks, in quotes, saying, "A lot of people are being attacked through phone calls, work emails, and much more on our campus by some pretty violent and extreme people out there." Again, note that the attacks and violence being mentioned here are all just words. Emails, telephone calls, and conversations are now presented as weapons against them in their minds. Laurier's spokesperson, Kevin Crowley, said the university is taking these concerns very seriously. He also said the university's Student Affairs Office and Human Resources have been coordinating supports for students, faculty, and staff employees. Now, the CBC was nice enough to include a recording of one of its radio shows, the morning edition, interviewing the activists and faculty who started a petition calling for the university to stand up for trans students and faculty members and asking for additional protective measures. I'm going to play this for you and comment on it because I think it shows how these actors are trying to refocus the spotlight. I believe they're doing this because they are worried that the public may start to see these new changes in the law from a more realistic perspective and how they are being applied in university disciplinary settings, and may very well begin to rethink the shiny new changes to the law.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about free speech on campus lately, especially in light of what happened at Laurier with TA Lindsay Shepherd. Some students and staff are now feeling the backlash of this conversation. Many from Wilfrid Laurier University are saying that the recent public debates have been making them feel unsafe because they're now facing homophobic remarks and harassment.
Now, I'd just like to point out the initial framing of this interview that many are feeling unsafe, in reference to a 300-plus signed open letter and petition stemming from these two individuals. To reuse the word many, I would assert that when many people sign a petition in support of a cause, many of them are not directly impacted by the issue, but are simply showing sympathy for a perceived injustice. Continuing.
So they started an open letter and petition demanding that the school put in measures to protect gender-diverse peoples. So far, more than 300 people have signed on. Greg Bird is an assistant professor in the sociology department at Laurier. He started the petition. And Toby Finley is a student at Laurier University who is a non-binary trans community organizer. Both joined me in studio this morning. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Greg, why did you start the petition?
Well, a group of faculty members at our university are quite concerned with the events that have happened.
I think there we can see a more realistic scope here with the aforementioned many being dwindled to a quaint group. Continuing.
The way the media has framed the events and the attacks that have been happening against our students and faculty. And it feels as if Ezra Levant's crowd and the Fox News and Fox and Friends have been all of a sudden shown up on our campus, and we want the administration to take a stronger stance and to provide more protection for all of us.
Is it just a problem with the media, or are we seeing internal problems as well with students?
For the most part, it's been media, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're asking for the university for protection from the media and how they are framing the issue so far. Continuing.
There have definitely been situations that students are experiencing on campus, are safer spaces that exist, such as the Rainbow Center for Women and Trans People, are being increasingly targeted or entered into, and then by folks who are either bringing us threatening messages or who are otherwise wanting to engage in these debates and these conversations.
Well, shit. I guess that reporters entering a publicly funded university and asking questions or engaging in debate about an issue the public would be concerned about is now a threatening message. Continuing.
Toby, what are some of the messages, what types of messages are you hearing?
We're getting a lot. There's a variety of messages that we've received. A lot of it is just that trans people are mentally ill. That's one that they go to a lot. They talk about just like denying our experience of gender altogether. We're getting a variety of slurs and things thrown at us, as well as threats that really compromise the safety as well as the health of trans and gender nonconforming individuals.
So now we get into a narrative that, and we have to assume that it's the media doing this, as they haven't mentioned anyone else in an identifying way, that reporters and media outlet representatives are allegedly hurling hateful, homophobic, and transphobic slurs that are dangerous and threatening to the health and identities of some students and faculty. So, translating that from social justice victim speak, they came in and asked you some questions about a topical issue. Okay, continuing.
If you can, tell me how it feels when you see things like that.
Yeah.
Fuck your feelings, skipping ahead to something more relevant.
Greg, in light of all these hate mails and harassment, what do you think, in general, is being misunderstood by the public?
And here's Daddy CBC in the person of Craig Norris to help you position turning questions, requests for interviews, and debates into hate mail and harassment on how the public just doesn't get it because the media is framing it wrong.
Well, the one thing that's being misunderstood, which I wanted to write when I wrote an op-ed in the Waterloo Record last week, was that most of us who are actually making our voices public are now being trolled online, doxxed, subjected to excessive rants in our workplace, telephones. We're receiving very long-winded emails.
These things happen online when you have any sort of opinion. And you work for a university, when you use your real name in making your voice heard, Google searches alone will dox you. Anyway, next we're going to witness a popular tool social justice advocates use to make a big deal out of nothing by conflating their group's cause with other protected groups through the magic of intersectional feminism. Enjoy!
Some are writing us to enter into debate, which we're open to, but we're receiving a lot of heinous remarks. There's been violent threats. There's been transphobic, homophobic, racist, Islamophobic, even anti-Semitic messages coming through to us. This weekend I was emailed by someone making anti-Semitic comments. I've seen many people questioning the existence of trans people. And all on social media, we've seen like a lot of hate. And so, and I am aware that the Waterloo Regional Police Services hate crimes units have been contacted over some of these cases. And what I really want to happen now is to change the discussion that's happening and expose some of these hate groups that are using this free speech discourse to actually promote their more violent and hatred views.
And there it is. After all those isms, ists, and icks, we get to the heart of the message this faculty member and activist are promoting here on CBC. Free speech is apparently a dog whistle of some sort for hate groups. The rest of the interview will showcase my point completely about how they fear the spotlight isn't focused through the lens they prefer, and all three participants just state that in multiple ways. Hang in there, guys.
How do you think that happens? How do we change this conversation? Either one of you can answer.
I think that part of the problem is the way that this has been framed as a freedom of speech issue has really not attended to this incredible violence and hate that's really at the center of it. And so originally it was about, for me, it was about shifting the public narrative and allowing them to see that these discussions about freedom of speech were really being used as a way to validate and uphold such hateful comments. But I think now what we really need is to see greater resistance, to see greater pushes for media accountability around these issues where these voices have been entirely erased, greater pushes for institutional accountability and for the institution as a whole to come out in support of trans and non-binary students who are experiencing harm, and to create mechanisms that don't allow these violences to continue to be perpetuated on our campus. I think that's
it. And Greg, picking up on something Toby said there, talking about a statement from the university to come out, that's one of the things you're calling for. Why a statement?
Well, the university's made a statement around the initial event, but they haven't actually made a statement defending trans and gender diverse students and faculty and staff at Wilfrid Laurier University. This is something that's upset a lot of people on our campus, and we feel as if we're being left out and exposed right now without proper protection from our institution. And we're asking the faculty to sign the letter, asking our administration to speak out very loudly in defense of all of us. And we're still waiting for that response.
So have you brought this to the president's attention?
Yes, we brought this to the president's attention. Our petition's gone out widely.
Was there a response from the president on this?
The president has responded not openly or publicly to the petition in any meaningful way. The responses have been that we've seen that safety precautions are in place, and the reality is that that's not true for a lot of trans and non-binary folks. A lot of the safety concerns that are being brought up in the letter and that we're being told are being handled haven't been put in place. But I think that what really is the issue, is that we have a president at Laurier who's coming out and speaking on one side of this issue in support of freedom of speech and freedom of expression very explicitly, but won't even name the experiences of trans and non-binary people. And so what it's really functioning to do is to validate all of the people who are using this as a free speech issue to erase the experiences of trans people. All of those people's voices are being heard and validated, and they're gaining more confidence to speak because of that.
We are out of time.
This interview was such a joke. It really gives you no specifics other than, hey, we started this petition, and now we'd like to publicly shame the university on a federally funded platform for not responding to us. The question posed half-assed at the end of this is the only attempt made at a balanced view on the issue, but not without a final pushback to a need to reframe it for the public.
Just really, if you can briefly, can the free speech conversation exist alongside this? We can have both. We can have this conversation equitably, correct? Do you think?
Absolutely. I think that freedom of speech, I think it's a mischaracterization to say that we are opposed to freedom of speech or that I am opposed to freedom of speech. But I think what we need is a greater equity lens, a greater acknowledgement of the harm that's really at the center of these conversations, and a reframing of the way that we're engaging.
I really appreciate both of you coming in today and talking about this. Thank you to both of you.
Jesus, the word salad is awful. So some of you might wonder why I give a shit about all this. Why go through the time and effort and emotional labor? It's simple. I have more than a few family members who are now in primary school or will be in school shortly, and I know this is just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. I know that we are all going to get to see blunder after social blunder, children suspended or kicked out of school completely because their words caused someone to file a human rights complaint. This will happen year after year to countless young people before, and if ever, we realize that sometimes, when the laws you pass are directly in opposition to known science, you've got to rid yourself of them. So I do have a stake in this, and we all do. Anyways, that's my take on this. Hopefully, I won't have to talk about it again. I have a feeling that shit's gonna be unavoidable. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Send me your fucking hate money on Patreon. Hit me up on Gab. Fuck Twitter. And fuck YouTube. Check out this video on vid.me. Anyway, you've all been great, I guess. And I'll see you next time. Peace out.